Announced policy of January 4, 2021. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Keller, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the topic of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, reflecting on my time in Congress and in the Pennsylvania General Assembly makes me think about how blessed I am and we are as Americans. I thank God for giving me the opportunity to serve the outstanding people of Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District and Pennsylvania's 85th Legislative District. I'm also thankful for all the lessons and people who God placed in my life. At a time when I needed guidance, God placed people before me to give me that guidance and that example. And then he gave me the wisdom to accept that guidance and put it to work. My dad, at a very young age, when I was very young, taught me a work ethic second to none. My grandmother taught me the importance of an education and how to be proper. Max Bingaman, owner of Bingaman & Son Lumber in Kramer, Pennsylvania, taught me business and leadership and how to be an adult. And I can't say enough about my wife and her family. My wife and brother-in-law are here today. I am so blessed to have them in my life. But my wife and her family taught me kindness. My mother-in-law, the kindest person I would know, and not many people, or it's not always heard people talking about their mother-in-laws so affectionately, but she was very kind. It's often said that behind every successful man, there's a surprised mother-in-law. That's a little joke of mine that I say. But my wife's family is truly exceptional, and I'm very blessed that I married into that family almost 38 years ago. The list could go on, but the point is no one accomplishes anything alone. America is the greatest country on earth. Nowhere else in the world can a poor kid like me go from picking up aluminum cans along the side of the road to owning his own home, running a business, starting a small business of his own, and get elected to Pennsylvania's House of Representatives or the United States Congress. Growing up, we never were envious. If we wanted something for ourselves, we were taught that we had to work for it. Hard work and education is the way to succeed in America. We knew the American dream was attainable, no matter who you are or what you have. We never used being poor as an excuse. In fact, one of the many things my grandmother taught me at a very young age, I was about 12 and she was about 75, and she sat us down at the table one day. I don't know what we had done, but she sat us down and she said, me and my brother, a year older than I, she sat us down and she said, "Boys, people who make excuses are weak." We never used an excuse. We never let anyone or our government define us. In today's world, if we'd have grown up now, people probably would have tried to define us as at risk or disadvantaged. No, we were just poor. Because if you believe in God and you live in the United States of America, you are not disadvantaged or at risk. I've used the experience growing up and the examples that the many people taught me over my lifetime to shape me into the person and public servant I am today. It has been an honor of my lifetime to represent the good people of Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District over the past few years, and I thank them for having the confidence in me to do that job. Our team worked to hold government accountable, create opportunities for workers and job creators, provide veterans with improved care, expand quality health care for rural communities, support our farmers, and bolster the Commonwealth's natural gas industry. One of the best parts of representing Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District has been traveling the district and meeting the outstanding, intelligent, and hardworking people who live in our communities. That's where the real work happens, and from where the solutions to our problems come. These are the people who make a difference. As politicians, we all go out and we campaign for office, and we all talk about jobs and what we're going to do. And my friend Bob Garrett, the president of the Greater Susquehanna Valley Chamber of Commerce, reminded me one time. He said, you know, Fred, you can't be pro-jobs and anti-business. I think that's a lesson that people in the Beltway could learn, because the job creators are the people, the workers that work in those jobs are the people that put it on the line every day to work and create the wealth in America. I can say with confidence that every day our team brought their voice and the values of the people of PA-12 to Washington, D.C. I'm incredibly grateful and honored for the work that we have accomplished. It is made possible by the integrity, passion, and commitment of our entire team. And what an outstanding group of individuals they are. In fact, our district director and chief of staff is here today, and I just want to give a shout out to Ann Kaufman, who is one of the hardest working, most intelligent people I know. Thank you for your work. John Anzer, Nick Barley's here with me somewhere today. Just great people. But I appreciate that, the passion, the commitment of the entire team. Without their efforts, their contribution, and their service, we would not have been able to serve Pennsylvania's congressional district so well. It would not have been possible. Though I will not be in Congress next year, I'm reminded of a quote from Ronald Reagan. President Reagan said, "There is no limit to what a man can do or where he can go if he doesn't mind who gets the credit." And I see some of my friend, Mr. Kelly. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Representative Miller Meeks. I think I saw somebody else over here. I don't know who it was, but Dr. Fox is here. I mean, great individuals and public servants. But, you know, I would say these are people who have servants' hearts. They are people who have helped me throughout my time in Congress. But to the rest of the people here in the Beltway, you know, America's greatness does not come from buildings and politicians. It comes from her citizens who are guided by our Lord God Almighty. And a personal example I can give to that, I mentioned a gentleman who's meant so much to me in adult life and been there to support my family whenever we needed it. His name is Max Bingaman. Max took this young kid and employed him and taught him business and taught him how to behave and taught him the right things to do. Max, my life is better because of you. Max, our community is better because of you, our Commonwealth and our nation. You have touched so many lives and been a great example to so many people. But take that example of Max Bingaman, and there are many other people that do that. And as I mentioned, it doesn't come from inside these walls. It comes from across our great nation. And we need to make sure that we honor and respect those people for whom we work. While our nation still faces many challenges, I am more confident than ever that we will be successful if we continue to believe in the greatness of the American people, get government out of the way, protect our God-given freedoms, and allow Americans to keep more of their hard-earned money. In fact, they've earned it. I'm often asked what I plan to do next. The answer is, I do not know. Whatever the good Lord has in store for me next, I will build upon the work our team has accomplished to ensure America remains that shining city on a hill that our forebears saw from afar. And it looks like we have some other people. Am I supposed to yield to you now, Mr. Kelly? I yield to the gentleman, my colleague from Pennsylvania.
And I thank my friend. So Fred and I met several years ago. A mutual friend of ours by the name of Tom Marino had been elected and then had decided to leave the Congress. And then we were really fortunate because the person who came in after Tom was Fred. And we formed kind of an instant friendship. And I think a lot of it has to be because of who raised us. Because we oftentimes talk about family. And I was looking at different things that people said over the ages. And this is Thomas Aquinas, 7 centuries ago, summed up what Western civilization understood to be the natural debt of gratitude all human beings owe to God, family, and country. And isn't that the truth on all of us? Who is it that we owe this incredible life we have? those who came before us. We talk today, and as we talk often, 1.5 million men and women gave their lives. It wasn't so much that they gave time, they gave their lives in order for us to practice this incredible form of government, this representative republic. People often get confused and talk about our democracy, our democracy, our democracy, and we are truly a republic. Then every voice gets heard, and every voice gets counted, and every person gets counted. And I think for my friend and I, we spend a lot of time together. I know when I look up in the gallery, his family is here, and where's Camry? Camry, stand up, honey. You're so little, I can't see you from down here. There she is. She is my favorite source of energy. I've never seen a child with the energy she has. But if you realize, she's just an offshoot of Grandma and Grandpa. So we've had great fun together. But I think more than anything else, when you come to Washington, if you've never been here before, and if you've not served public before, one of the things when you come to Washington, you're told right away, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. Well, for me, it wasn't getting a dog. It was getting a chance to serve with Fred Keller. We do a lot of things together, mostly talk about family and faith and the opportunity we have to serve the people who sent us. It's never about me. It's always about we. It's never about us. It's always about our families. It's about our wives. It's about our children. It's about our parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles. And you talk about your former employer so well. I feel I know Max, although we've never met or never shook hands. Just from the way you've talked about him, I feel I know who he is, and I know how important he was in the whole being of Fred Keller. This is truly one of the most unselfish men I've ever known. He doesn't come here for himself. He comes here for his family. He comes here for the people he represents. And he comes here for that 1.5 million men and women who've given their lives to give us the opportunity to practice this incredible form of government. I know sometimes we get mixed up about what this is all about, and when we sit here and we say, this is the people's house with the emphasis on the people. It's not Fred Keller's house, it's not Mike Kelly's house, it's not Virginia Fox, it's not Dr. Miller Meeks. It's about the people we represent. And each of us represent about 750,000 people. And I know that every week when we have the chance to come here and share time together and share the opportunity to actually bring about legislation, as do you, Mr. Speaker, we need to take a breather sometime and forget about all the hyperbole and think about all the blessings we have. Because there's truly no place else in the world like this. And there never has been. But it's up to us to make sure it's available for that next generation. So when I look up in the gallery, I see Camry up here. Fred doesn't come here for Fred. Fred comes here for Camry and for Carson and for all the other people he represents back in Pennsylvania. And I think that's the beauty of us who are so fortunate and so honored to serve. Because it's not about us. It is about our constituents. It is about all those who came before us. I got to tell you, buddy, I hate to see you leave. Because we've had a lot of fun together. We share a lot of meals. We share a lot of stories. You're great at entertaining my staff. They get bored with me from time to time. And they always say, boy, I hope Mr. Keller stops by today. But we've formed an incredible friendship. I've got to know Fred. I've got to know his wife and his family. He is truly one of the finest Americans you could ever be around. So I want to tell you, it's been a wonderful time. It's been a wonderful life, not to coin any famous movies that we're all favorite of, but I got to tell you, it's been a great time, buddy. And the service you have given to God, to your family, and to your country is immeasurable. We're going to miss you being here, but I know this is not the end of the Fred Keller story. And I'm a phone call away, brother. Anytime you need me, I'm a phone call away. So it's been a pleasure serving with you, and I'm going to yield back my time, but you know what? You've got some fan favorites that are here with you that I think that we should hear from. And one of my all-time favorite people is Virginia Fox, who's sitting beside me. Dr. Fox is one of a kind, and as you know, serving on her committee, just how special she is. But Mr. Kelly,
if I can say thank you, Mike.
Love you, pal. Love you too, buddy. Love you too.
A true friend, and I have to say about Dr. Fox. I remember when I first got here and they were working out committees because I came in on a special election, and I had a promise not to create any trouble for Dr. Fox, I think is what it was. But I think what it really meant was you better work hard. I think that's what it meant. You better contribute. You better work hard. And there isn't anybody that runs a better ship when it comes to making sure that we accomplish the goals on behalf of the people we represent than a great mentor, a great person that has become a friend over the past few years, Dr. Virginia Fox.
Thank you, Congressman Keller. And as we say here sometimes to save time, I certainly want to associate myself with the very eloquent words of Congressman Kelly. He is so good. You see, he needed no notes. He just can come up here and speak without anything. This is a tough day for me to come in and talk about your leaving, Congressman Keller. But, you know, we want to let you know how much we appreciate you, and that's why we're here. One thing I've learned about Representative Fred Keller while serving with him in Congress is that he's someone who's always shows up prepared to work on behalf of job creators and workers, and who's committed to upholding the Constitution. And I'm so glad your staff and family are there in the gallery with us today, because I know they've heard positive things about you before, but I think it's helpful for them to hear us come here today in this special place to say these things to you. I've greatly appreciated and admired Fred's strong commitment to conservative principles. As a businessman and job creator himself, he knows the free market works and is dedicated to protecting it. It's clear why Fred recently received the Guardian of Small Business Award from the National Federation of Independent Business. His stalwart defense of limited government and fiscal responsibility will serve as an example to current and future lawmakers alike. Fred has been an important leader on the Education and Labor Committee. As the Republican leader on the Workforce Protection Subcommittee, Fred worked hard to protect the rights of workers and job creators. He was well suited for this function because he has real-world experience in business. Managing a plant of 250 people for 25 years gave Fred the experience needed to serve our country's workforce. The committee and this Congress have benefited from his insight and wisdom. I've also admired Fred's commitment to the sanctity of life, which has been second to none in this body. I'll never forget the story Fred told during a hearing that none of us had ever heard before and were not expecting to hear. But the story was about his son, Freddie, who suffered a traumatic brain injury at a young age. Doctors told Fred and his wife that there was zero chance his son would recover. Despite pressure from doctors, Fred and his wife refused to take their son off life support. Freddie recovered and is now in his 30s, working for the healthcare industry. What a victory for a parent's love for their son and the principle of life. But Fred's commitment to life didn't end back in his son's hospital room. It is something he's been dedicated to throughout his life. No matter where he goes, Fred wears a pin on his collar that represents the exact size and shape of a baby's feet at 10 weeks after conception. It's a daily reminder that life is sacred and that it is our duty to protect the most vulnerable. It's no surprise that Fred received the A+ rating from the Susan B. Anthony list on their national pro-life scorecard. And as he said on the House floor, "If my time in Congress is to be remembered for one thing, let it be that I fought to defend the sanctity of life." You have certainly done that, Fred. Congressman Keller, we will remember. We will remember that you stood against Democrats' radical pro-abortion agenda. We will remember that you stood up for the conscience rights and religious freedom of healthcare workers. And we will remember that you gave a voice to the 63 million unborn babies killed in the womb before they had voices. Today, when our first freedoms are called into question, we need leaders who will take a stand without wavering and defend our constitutional rights. That's exactly what Fred did when he introduced the Restoring Academic Freedom on Campus Act. Defending the freedom of expression on college campuses is imperative, and I appreciate Fred's work on this issue. The freedom to speak and think freely comes from God. Students should not have to sign away their First Amendment rights after enrolling in college, especially if those institutions accept taxpayer funds. It is time for colleges and universities to be held accountable when they refuse to protect the free speech of students and faculty. I also greatly appreciate how Fred led the Congressional Review Act resolution against OSHA's tyrannical vaccine mandate. Fred used every legislative avenue to help nullify President Biden's emergency temporary standard that would have forced millions of workers to get the COVID-19 vaccine or face losing their job. His commitment to protecting the individual liberties of every American stands out. And when OSHA finally withdrew this authoritarian measure after losing at the Supreme Court, Fred and I celebrated. This is a lesson to us all. Even when the hill is steep, we must fight on. Even in this case, standing up for the Constitution saved so many Americans from being coerced into making a medical decision they were uncomfortable with. We need leaders who have the courage of their convictions. Fred is such a leader. Being a leader means having the prudence also to know which hills to fight on, which hills to abandon, and which hills are worth dying for. I believe Fred and I agree that the preservation of our God-given rights is worth any and every sacrifice. And that is why it's been an honor to serve alongside him. Common cause always creates uncommon bonds, and I'll miss you as a partner. Lastly, Fred has something that far too many of our national leaders lack: humility. Fred has always cared more about service than the spotlight. Saying Fred will be missed is an understatement. He is what every statesman should be: prudent, decisive, and gracious. Congressman Keller, we wish you the best in your future endeavors, knowing that whatever you do next will be in further service to the American people. From a grateful country and from someone who is honored to call herself your friend, thank you for all you've done to protect freedom and constitutional government. You will be missed.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. I certainly wasn't anticipating my friends to be here today, but I do want to say, and you know, Dr. Fox, you are a great example, and of course we have Representative Miller Meeks here. But I would like to say, Dr. Fox, if I can, as I told my friend Max Bingham when I decided not to run again, I said, Max, I don't have to be elected to serve. Think of all the people that we represent that make a difference every day when they take a kid like me and invest time and resources in them. And that's what the people across America do. That's what you do. That's what Mike Kelly does. That's what Representative Miller Meeks does. And I will stay in touch with all my friends here that are here to make a difference. So thank you for that. And I will yield to Congresswoman Miller Meeks.
Thank you to my colleague, Representative Fred Keller, for yielding me time to speak. I don't know if I'm going to make it through this without a tear either, Dr. Fox, but I've had the privilege of spending the last 2 years across the hallway in the Longworth building from our colleague, Fred Keller. Throughout that time, I've been lucky enough to get to know Fred and his staff, and each was eager to lend a hand as my own staff and I adjusted to our new office, which was a little bit of a challenge because we had a contest, and so we were a little late adding staff. And I think one of the easiest ways to judge a member of Congress is by their staff and the team that they assemble. And Team Keller has always been helpful, insightful, talented, intelligent, kind, and thoughtful. I also know Fred and his wife when we met for a longer period of time last summer at Nemacolin. in Pennsylvania, his home state. And he and his wife and my chief of staff enjoyed getting to know one another. And I got to know Fred as a family man who was elected in a special election as a surprise to his wife when he let her know that he was going to run for Congress, and got to know he and his family, and especially his family members that he would bring up to the Capitol, his granddaughters, who can be found running up on the 7th floor or here in chambers. When I asked his staff about Fred, one of the things they said struck me because it's also the reason that I ran for Congress. Fred wanted to make the American dream accessible to everyone, regardless of their background, their social status, their upbringing, their class, their race, or where they come from. To do so, he spent his days bringing Pennsylvania to Washington and taking Washington back home. He believed, rightfully so, that D.C. could benefit from more hard work and fewer frills. Now, I don't want you to think that Fred's only a serious person, because that would underestimate another part of his personality. I also enjoyed spending time with Fred at the Ed and Labor Committee, and being in the minority is no fun. So once I caught Fred, more than once, thinking out loud and speaking under his breath. And because I sat next to him when we were permitted to do so after the COVID requirements were lifted, I thought he raised some very salient, erudite points. And so, as the next Republican to speak, I added them to my own 5-minute speech. After I finished speaking, Fred turned to me and he said, "You raised some really good points." And I laughed and said, "I certainly hope so. They were the points that you made, and I stole them." He had no idea that he speaks out loud and under his breath, and that I would listen to him and hear him. But that was Fred. He was and is full of great ideas. And we were so very fortunate to have him as a colleague. And I was tremendously saddened the day he announced he would not run for re-election, and that I would miss him as a colleague and as a friend. I really look forward to what's next for Fred, because he will always be in service, and he will always succeed, and he will always be a leader. Because what makes a leader isn't their title, it's not their position, it's not the pin they wear on their lapel. What makes a leader is an individual who, by their example, inspires and motivates others, who challenges others to go beyond what they think is their capacity and reach heights that they did not know they could even reach. Fred does that for his children, for his grandchildren, and for all of us. I have a feeling this isn't the last that we'll see of Fred, and I look forward to future encounters with he and his family. Thank you so much, Fred, for gracing me with all of your intellect, your ideas, your silent comments under your breath, your salient points, and getting to know your family. I yield back.
Thank you. I thank you for that, Dr. Miller Meeks. You're truly an outstanding individual, a veteran, one of the people that stood on the line to defend our freedom and our way of life. And that's why we're here. So many fought, and so many cared about the idea that's America. And there are so many people that will continue to do that. And for that, I want to tell them thank you. Thank you for your service. I now will yield to my friend and my granddaughter's friend's dad, okay? Olivia's dad. You know, when you have grandkids, you sort of lose your title, but I'll say from Arizona, Congressman Schweikert, I yield you the time that you may need.
Thank you. And Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, you got to admit, yeah, a lot of people love you. It's been fun actually watching them come up to the microphone and say actually sweet things about you. But, you know, the best thing is your granddaughter. My little girl just loves playing with her. You know, and that's something I do hope this body does more of in the future. Our kids, you know, the last couple of years, they haven't been here. And before the pandemic, we would look out and people would have their families here. And I will tell you that helped in the relationships where my little girl would go and jump on Maxine Waters' lap because she loved her necklace. I still have a great picture of that. And till this day, every time I see Maxine, she asks about my little girl. That's in some ways, it's those family units of how you build human relations in this body. So just a thought for, what's left of the majority and those things. We need to sort of think about the things that bind us together once again as people. And I appreciate you giving me a little bit of time here. Speaker Pro Tem, one of the reasons we're doing this is we've been trying to do a series of presentations, and I keep being fussed at I should do them shorter because we're trying to throw out lots of ideas. For the last year, I've been coming behind the microphone and walking through just how terrified I am and how terrified I believe all of us should be on what's going on in the numbers. So we're going to do the routine again, but the beauty here is there's hope. And I'm going to keep bringing ideas that do a couple things. Number one is make us freer, healthier, wealthier, but also show a path that we can grow and we don't have to be crushed by the coming debt. So let's sort of walk through some of this. And we always start with this slide because this one really bothers everyone. This one makes everyone angry, and it's the math. Today we have $31 trillion of debt. Next 30 years, functionally we add $114 trillion of borrowing. Every dime of that $114 trillion that's coming, 75% of it's Medicare, 25% Social Security. The rest of the budget actually has a positive balance. We got old. Is the graying of America, is it Republican or Democrat? It's neither. It's just demographics. It's what we are. But the unwillingness to deal with the reality that if you want to save the country, if you do not want my 5-month-old little boy that we're just adopting, my 7-year-old little girl that plays together, if you want to save their future, because do understand today, 25 years from now, we have to double their tax rates. We have to double your tax rates. We have to double corporations' tax rates just to maintain the baseline spending. And that's still with us going, I think, to like 140% of debt to GDP. I mean, do we understand how bad the numbers are? And it's demographic. So what do? I'm trying to pitch sort of a unified theory for us to think. And I'm sorry this upsets people, but the math will always win. And instead of the craziness that goes on around here where I got my feelings hurt, maybe the most powerful thing we can do is demonstrate we give a damn. And growth is moral. And growth helps Democrats and Republicans. It helps poor people. It gives opportunity to the middle class. It's good for all of us. So we're trying to say, okay, I've been spending lots of time behind the microphone talking about technology that can crash the price of healthcare. And we're going to do even a little more of that today. But I'm going to also talk about other ways we can do regulation that keeps us still healthy and safe, but is much less bureaucratic and much faster. How about, I'm going to come back in the next couple of weeks, if we get time, and talk about revolutionizing the tax system that incentivizes to make things in America instead of functionally a tax system that incentivizes to buy things made in other parts of the world, because that's what we have today. We're going to also talk about immigration, really uncomfortable to talk about, but you're going to have to decide as a society, do we keep the open borders that I have in Arizona, where we're functionally mass poverty movement into the United States, or do we move to a system that maximizes economic growth? Got to decide. If you want us to have the money to be able to pay for Medicare, I got to have the economic growth. And then the other thing is, what do we do to incentivize our brothers and sisters to stay in the labor market? You just became 65. Are there things we could do in a spiff on your Social Security so you stay in the labor market? How about if we let you keep your half of the FICA? What can we do? There's a crazy piece of math out there for our under 35, particularly males. They're not participating. the numbers of them who have disappeared from the labor markets. And this makes some of the math really difficult if you're trying to grow, because it's not enough to have the disruption in the cost of healthcare if on the same side over here, we don't have the economic growth. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, may I ask how many minutes we have left? Sorry.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania has 25 minutes remaining.
Actually, I think I'm allowed to ask, even though it's your time.
Oh, it's okay with me. I yield to the man to ask how much time he has.
All right, and I'm going to run through these fairly quickly because I want to keep the theme going, and I'm going to be dogged about this because we're going to save this country. We need to think a little bit differently, because right now we're still having the same debates we were having in the 1990s on this floor. So last night I just mentioned this. Tonight I thought I'd bring the board with me. So what would happen if I came to you tomorrow and said, hey, there's this thing, it looks like a kazoo, and you blow into it and it almost instantly tells you you have a virus. It instantly bounces off your medical records, instantly could order your antiviral. Oh, and by the way, the newest versions look like they can detect about 25 different dead cancer proteins. Wouldn't that be really good for our constituents? Wouldn't that be the ability for that hard-working family, that working mom, to not try to find a way to take the day off from work, to be able to organize the kids, to find out, can she go into an urgent care center, but functionally have a breath biopsy in her medicine cabinet? I'll argue it's both moral, it's faster, it's healthier, and it crashes the price of healthcare. And this body keeps that type of technology illegal. Something that would save so much time for the working people of this country, and we keep it illegal because this place is so much like a protection racket. And it's not utopian. There's a dozen different versions, and it exists. Much of it's already made it through the FDA. Our problem is we don't reimburse it, and we don't make it legal so it can write the script. And if you don't reduce the cost, you can't do marginal. I have some people come here and say, well, we have an idea. We can remove 2 or 3% out of healthcare costs if we do this. We had a 16% healthcare inflation in many of our markets so far this year. But great, we can find a 1 or 2% rounding error. Do you understand how much trouble we're in? Your government functionally is an insurance company with an army. And it's going to be an insurance company where the insurance side is going to start consuming every dollar, and the army is going to have to get smaller. And it's demographic. It's the reality where we're at. Why wouldn't this body take an experiment and say, let's make it legal? If you can find insurance, if the manufacturer can find insurance for it, FDA approves it, why wouldn't we let this write a script? And there's dozens and dozens and dozens of these things. For those of you that walk around with these smart watches or your fancy supercomputer in your pocket, the fact of the matter is we should be using every piece of technology to crash the price of health care. Last night I came and showed some slides about a path, and who knows, maybe it doesn't work, but there might be a path for a cure for diabetes. Diabetes is 33% of all healthcare spending. It's 31% of all Medicare spending. It may be the leading contributor to income inequality. You go, huh? Look at the data. Look at my data sets of who is suffering, who's going blind, who's having their feet cut off. I represent a tribal community with the second highest per capita diabetes in the world. Is it moral not for us to go and throw every smart idea and sometimes the resources we need to cure it? Wouldn't that be more moral than this crazy-ass argument of, hey, let's go build more clinics so we can help people manage their misery? Because that's what we do here. We're better than this. Well, no, we're not better than this, but we could be. So let's go a little further down the crazy line of what do you do to grow the economy? So think about what we did last week. We're going to stop this strike because we're going to fight for the way we move goods out of the port and put them on trucks and then put them on a rail car and move it over here. And yes, we have all this environmental issues of, yes, it's really dirty, it's really filthy, but the Democrats in their Inflation Reduction, was a crazy name for what the bill actually did. Bill made it so if they're going to take the green money, they can't actually do certain innovation. They can't automate because they have to protect all their longshoremen union folks because that's who writes them checks. So in one hand, we give great lip service. We got to fix the supply chain. We got to get greener as an economy, and then they make it illegal. It's in your legislation. You did it. And yet, at the same time, we have brilliant innovators. And these things aren't Republican. They're just the next generation of innovation, of autonomous rail platforms. You take the container off, you put it on the platform, you hit the button, and you say, go to the spur over here and dump this at the warehouse. Go take this and put it at the manufacturing facility. Go put this at... It's electric. The environmental load is dramatically cleaner. It would be a revolution of efficiency. We keep saying, well, we've got to fix the supply chain. But damn it, you made parts of fixing the supply chain illegal. Why does this place act like a barrier, a protection barrier of allowing innovation in the economy? And we do this over and over and over. Most of the members don't know it's happening. But we've functionally made that disruption that grows the economy, that if we don't have that growth, we're in real trouble. Go ahead.
Can I just say, I mean, you inspired me to think of something. This is the only place that does less with more. The only place that does it. I'm sorry, you're talking about this efficiency and stuff, and I just look at this place.
And we make it illegal.
And during COVID, they talked about essential jobs. Well, I tell you what, this is probably the only place on earth where there's some jobs that are not essential.
Oh, no.
Quite frankly. But anyhow, sorry for taking your time, sir. But it just reminded me of that. This is the only place on the face of the earth that does less with more.
Look, how many times, and you have some of this in your district, will we get the lobbyists and the folks come in, and this has been going on for 30 years. So this is sort of one of the running joke scams around here. We need money for rural broadband. We do. And I have, communities in Arizona. I don't represent them. They've been waiting 20 years for that line to get out to the chapter house on the Navajo reservation. The fact of the matter is every inch of this country actually has broadband right now. They just happen to be satellites. We have, 5 companies? A couple of them already have most of their satellites up.
Actually, I have an F-150 that I can run 7 devices from anywhere in PA-12.
Oh, what years you? I drive a long bed.
2022.
Yeah, when I had my midlife crisis, I didn't want a new wife or Porsche. I just wanted a long bed pickup truck.
Well, I got to.
And mine's 10 years old.
I got the F-150 because I didn't have to buy a generator because it has one in it. So that was my justification.
But you think about this. Is if I really cared about that community, and you see where this ties in. This is back to that unified theory. I believe much of my health care, I can use technology, but I need access to the broadband. But I'm going to wait for the wire to show up because that's incredibly inefficient. But I do have an option right now where something like the Starlink satellite, I could actually put up a little oval-shaped dish so they have the broadband, so they can use the healthcare technology, let alone the education technology and the other things. I need you to see this as a unified theory. But instead, we're going to take that tax that's on your cell phone bill, hand it out to companies, and then we're going to wait another decade for that wire to get out and never gets there. When they already have access to broadband, and this could be urban too. The technologies exist. So let me go to Crazy Town.
You're already here.
No. This is a little more ethereal, but it's in the field. It's being tested right now. And I'm not going to do the whole thing about a C4 plant and a C3 plant. Remember your high school biology class. But what would happen in a world, and I'm sorry, this slide's a little old, so it's a little beaten on. How do you get the Ag Committee to have an honest conversation saying, you do realize there's about to be a revolution in food. This whole thing called synthetic biology, they basically figured out how to take a plant, our high school biology plant, the plant really, really, really wants a carbon molecule, so it turns it into a sugar so it can grow. It accidentally grabs an oxygen. It doesn't need the oxygen, so it has to spend all this energy getting rid of the oxygen, so it gets a carbon so it can grow. Okay. What happens if the plant every time got a carbon molecule? In some plants, you could have a 40% improvement in growth. dramatically less water, dramatically less land needed, dramatically less fertilizer. This is being tested right now. I think it's University of Illinois. It's out there. How much discussion have we had that there's a revolution coming in agriculture? And it would be incredibly productive. It'll be incredibly disruptive. Because what happens in agricultural land if all of a sudden I have crops that grow dramatically more efficiently? But it would also be amazing for the environment. A 40% production improvement, which you're not going to get, but if you did, theoretically, in world agriculture, you do realize that would be like removing every car off the face of the earth. How many hearings have we had on, is this coming? Is this feasible? No, because that would require thinking, something we just don't do here. The other thing I'm going to give you is just a conceptual idea, and if anyone is crazy enough, go on YouTube, Schweikert Environmental Crowdsourcing. 5-6 years ago, I did a little YouTube cartoon. It's like 90 seconds. With this concept, you could actually attach a little environmental sensor to the bottom of this. How about if in your community you had a couple thousand people driving around with a little environmental sensor saying, hey, we're keeping an eye on the air quality. Hey, it's spouting off. I have some clowns over here painting cars in the back of their house, but the motorcycle paint shop over here that has its filters, it's not setting the alarm off. Leave them alone. What would happen if your environmental data was living data? You wouldn't need people to go fill out paperwork. You don't need an inspector. You don't do file cabinets full of paper make the environment cleaner. They don't. They just build bureaucracies. What makes the environment cleaner is knowing when someone has done something stupid and stopping them. Crowdsource it. The data's living. Use a living data model. And guess what? You can do that for water, sound. You can actually do it for health. You can do it for all sorts of things. How many hearings has this place had to discuss dragging our regulatory environment? And it's not deregulating, it's smart regulating. Make us more efficient. And it turns out the data says that we would be healthier, cleaner, faster, and you would get the bad guys, and you could build a model where you just leave the good actors alone. If you're the motorcycle paint shop, and your filters are working, and your booth is working, why should you be bothered? Just leave them alone. And if they screw up, a crowdsourced environmental sensor model will catch them instantly. And you'd be amazed the pushback you get because, well, we're a consulting firm. You just put us out of business. Hey, I work for the group. I shove paperwork into file cabinets. Why do you want to unemploy me? We're going to have the discussion if we intend to survive where we're going population-wise, debt-wise. Remember, functioning 10 years, we have $2 trillion running deficits. And it's demographics. It's trying to pay for health care. We got to have the growth, and we got to have the technology disruption of health care, or we're in for some very dark times. And the fact of the matter is, we could have incredibly prosperous times for the future. But that prosperity is only going to come if I and you and the people who are willing to listen to this are willing to pound on members of Congress and our staff and the lobbying communities and our creative thinkers out there and say, okay, guys, there's hope out there. There's hope. We just need to be willing to think differently and embrace the disruption and embrace an economy that actually starts to do good things for our people instead of basically being a protection racket for incumbent models. And it's uncomfortable. But there's hope. But there's no hope if we keep doing the same thing. And look, to my friend from Pennsylvania, thank you for letting me do this. We're finding the only way it's going to sink in is if I keep coming, giving more and more examples that there is hope if we just do things differently. So thank you for giving me some of your time. And I yield back to the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I thank the gentleman from Arizona. Thank you for your insight. I have nobody else to speak in this hour, so I yield back the balance of my time.